Have you ever felt truly alone, isolated in a place where every creak and whisper feels like it's meant just for you? This is a tale about one woman, an ancient curse, and a shadowy presence named MoMo. Once MoMo is called, she never leaves. Claire was an artist who sought quiet solitude to rekindle her creativity. She found the perfect place, a cottage hidden in the depths of the countryside, surrounded by nothing but thick woods and silence. It was a charming place, a little worn but still full of potential, with ivy creeping along the sides and a welcoming chimney that added to its rustic charm. Her friends had warned her it was too far from the town, too isolated. But Claire craved the peace, or so she thought. After settling in, she noticed small, unsettling details, the constant shadows under the trees, strange carvings in the wooden beams, and an oppressive chill that clung to the house, even on sunny afternoons. But she brushed it all off as her mind playing tricks. This was her time to create, her perfect escape. It was her third night in the cottage when she began to hear the whispers. She was sketching at her desk by candlelight when she heard it, soft, faint, but clear. The voice was barely above a murmur, so quiet it could almost be mistaken for the wind. Claire turned around, half expecting to see someone behind her, but the room was empty, its corners veiled in shadow. She shook it off, chalking it up to exhaustion, and continued sketching. But each night the whisper grew louder, more insistent. "Claire, come closer," it would say, as if coaxing her deeper into the cottage. She'd lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as the voice filled the air around her, creeping into her mind. She would press her pillow over her head, trying to block it out, but it never worked. By the fifth night she was exhausted, her mind frayed by the sleeplessness and the constant, unnerving whispers. Curiosity turned to desperation as she began searching for the source of the sound. She combed through the rooms one by one, her flashlight barely piercing the darkened spaces. Finally, she reached the last place left to explore, the attic. Even as her heart pounded in fear, something compelled her to open that door. She didn't know why, but the attic felt alive, as if it was waiting for her. Slowly, she opened the door. A thick, stale smell wafted out, and the air was colder, denser, as if something dark had settled there long ago. She climbed the narrow stairs, gripping her flashlight tightly. Shadows leaped and twisted with each step, casting eerie shapes across the walls. As she reached the top, her flashlight caught a glimpse of something scrawled along the walls, words scratched into the wood in a strange, ancient language. Her skin prickled as she traced them with her fingertips, feeling their uneven, jagged surface. They looked fresh, as though they'd been carved recently. She swept her light over the attic floor, and that's when she saw it. In the far corner, a figure crouched low, hidden by the shadows. Claire froze, feeling her heart thundering in her chest. She wanted to run, but her legs felt anchored to the floor, as if something was holding her in place. She forced herself to look closer, and the figure shifted, its face slowly emerging from the darkness. The sight was horrific. Sunken eyes, bulging and unblinking, stared at her with an intensity that made her stomach churn. Its face was gaunt, skin stretched taut over sharp, protruding bones, and then it smiled, a grin that was too wide, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. The thing moved closer, one long, bony finger raised as if beckoning her. MoMo, it hissed, its voice a slithering whisper that seemed to wrap around her. Paralyzed by fear, Claire could only watch as MoMo inched closer, its eyes fixed on her. The stench of decay filled the air, thick and suffocating, as it reached out and touched her shoulder with icy fingers. Claire's skin crawled, her breath hitching as a wave of dread washed over her. The creature leaned in, its face mere inches from hers. "You called me, and now I will stay," it whispered, voice oozing with malice. The next morning, Claire awoke in her bed, drenched in sweat. She stumbled through the cottage, checking every room, every corner, but there was no sign of MoMo. But the silence in the cottage felt heavier, almost watchful. She could feel it, a presence lurking, just beyond sight. Desperate, she tried to leave, packing her things as fast as she could. But as she reached the front door, she felt an invisible force pushing her back, like a weight pressing down on her chest. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't take a single step outside. Days turned into weeks, and Claire was trapped, bound to the cottage by MoMo's invisible grip. She'd feel its cold touch as she moved from room to room to room, see its shadow flickering in her peripheral vision. She began hearing voices, Momo's voice whispering, mocking her. The house became a maze, doors shifting, hallways stretching, twisting as if alive. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind until she could barely think. "You'll stay with me, Claire." Forever. Claire's days and nights blended into one endless nightmare. Her once bright eyes grew hollow, dark circles etched beneath them as she paced the cottage in a daze, hearing the constant hum of whispers in her ears. She'd see Momo's face in every shadow, feel its cold breath on her neck when she tried to sleep. The world outside the cottage felt like a distant memory, fading further with each passing day. And then, one night, Momo spoke to her, clearer than ever before. "Look in the mirror," it whispered. Claire's heart pounded as she turned, her feet moving on their own toward the old, cracked mirror in the hall. She stared at her reflection, but it was not her face looking back. It was Momo's, the bulging eyes, the twisted grin, the sharp teeth. She stumbled back, her scream echoing through the empty rooms, but the reflection remained. She was no longer herself. She was becoming Momo. Trapped, hopeless, and alone, Claire finally understood the truth. Momo was not just a spirit, it was the darkness, the fear, and the despair that she had harbored within herself, drawn out and brought to life by her own loneliness. It was part of her now, a dark reflection of everything she had tried to escape. There would be no leaving, no release. She was bound to the cottage, and Momo was bound to her. As days turned into nights and nights into eternity, the cottage fell silent. People from the nearby town eventually noticed her absence and ventured to check on her, but the cottage was empty, cold, and abandoned. The only clue left behind was a single word scratched into the wood above the attic door, Momo. But locals say that, on certain moonless nights, if you listen closely near the old cottage, you might hear a faint, eerie whisper on the wind, and if you ever hear it calling your name, beware. For once you've called Momo, she never leaves. Thank you for listening. Remember, some things are meant to remain unseen, unheard. Be careful what you seek in silence, for you might awaken something that should never have been disturbed. Momo is always listening, and she waits for the lonely.